Hotep, how's everybody doing today? Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Hope everybody's doing well. Hey, I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. Founder of the African History Network, founder of the Facebook fan page that we are broadcasting on. So we made it through another week. It's another Friday. I think this is day 170 something of the Donald Trump regime. Okay. So today is Friday, July 14th, 2017. And I wanted to do this broadcast past couple of days, but it's been so hectic. I haven't been able to do it. I had to do my segment on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation on the morning show. Wake Up with Steve Hood. Had to do that Thursday morning. And I'm getting ready to head to Atlanta for the Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo, which is Saturday, July 15th through Sunday, July 16th in Atlanta, Georgia Piedmont Technical Center. So I'll be there doing a presentation. But I want to wanted to do two things. So today we're going to talk about the 3/5 compromise, the 3/5 compromise of 1787, the 3/5 compromise of 1787. Okay. And this is in the U.S. Constitution. All right. We're going to talk about that and dispel some myths about that. And I've talked about this before in some of my shows, but I haven't really done a real, presentation video about this. OK. And also we're going to do a brief overview, a brief preview of an online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we'll be teaching, I'll be teaching another session of that online course this evening about 7:30 p.m. or so, okay, online. And you can register for it. We'll post a link to register. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. Normally on Fridays, about 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. Okay. So as soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 or 4 sessions, and we have about 12 hours of bonus footage or bonus content. So we just posted the link there. It says register here. You can register for that online course if you like also. And the full course is only $40. All right. Okay. So in some of my presentations and also radio shows that I do, I've done national radio, did national radio for a few years. I do radio here in Detroit. Oftentimes I hear people talk about the Constitution says we were 3/5 of a human being. The Constitution says we were 3/5 of a human being. I was just listening to a national radio show today, and it said the same thing. Somebody called in and said the same thing as well. All right. That is not true. That is not historically accurate. That is not what the Constitution says. So we're going to break this down based upon facts and evidence. Okay. Shout out to everybody watching us on Facebook. Hey, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Okay. And we'll put this on our YouTube channel also as well. Okay. So, what people are referring to is Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 or Paragraph 3 of the U.S. Constitution, and it's known as the 3/5 Compromise. Okay, it's known as the 3/5 Compromise of 1787. All right, and I remember back in 1963, I think it was 63, University of California in Berkeley. There's a famous interview that Malcolm X did. And Malcolm X talked about, he said the Constitution said we were 3/5 of a human being. And he said that the slave master got a 3/5 weighted vote. Okay. I love Malcolm to death. Malcolm's one of my heroes. All right. And I just did a presentation, I think it was 2 Saturdays ago, in Malcolm's hometown of Lansing, Michigan. Okay. I live in Detroit. Lansing's the capital. He lived in Lansing, Michigan for a while when he was a child, till his family's house was burned down. They were ran out of Lansing. They went to East Lansing. But that's not true. And you see the picture of Malcolm behind me, right? You see the picture of Malcolm behind me. Malcolm's one of my heroes. Okay. But that's just not true. All right. So let's deal with this historically. Okay. So if we look at the U.S. Constitution, all right, and you can go to loc.gov, which is the Library of Congress's website, loc.gov. That's the Library of Congress's website. Can everybody hear me okay? Just want to make sure. Looks like the video may be breaking up a little bit here on Facebook. Okay. But when we look at the, just want to make sure everybody can hear me all right. Okay. When we look at the U.S. Constitution, now you can go to loc.gov. That's the Library of Congress's website. You can also go to archives.gov. Okay, that's the National Archives. You can read the U.S. Constitution there. You may want to get yourself a book like this. Okay, so when I bought this book, I don't remember exactly what year. This is about 8 years ago. This was $2. This is called The Declaration of Independence and Other Great Documents of American History. The Declaration of Independence and Other Great Documents of American History. Okay. And this has the Emancipation Proclamation. This has the U.S. Constitution, Declaration of Independence, all those documents in this one book. Okay. You may want to get something like this. So if we look at this and what it actually says, okay, I'm gonna go over what it actually says in the Constitution. Then we'll deal with the history behind it, because most people don't understand the history behind it. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 says, representatives and direct taxes, okay, shall be apportioned, keyword, shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole numbers of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons with a capital P, 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years in such manner as they shall by law direct. Okay, so the first now this is 1787. All right, this is in the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution is largely written by Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner, okay, who's going to become president in 1800, right? And this is during the Philadelphia Convention that the Constitution is debated on and hashed out and revised, etc. Okay, so this is during 1787. This is during the American Revolutionary War, which is from this is after American Revolutionary. This is American Revolutionary War is 1775 to 1783. Okay, so this is after American Revolutionary War. This is 1787. Okay, this is after the Declaration of Independence of 1776, signed July 4th, 1776 by a few people. The majority of the signers don't sign it until August 2nd, 1776. Okay, all right. So what they're talking about here, keyword, apportioned. All right. And when you look at the first line, it said representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among several states which may be included within the union, okay, according to their respective numbers. All right, so there's a very good article that you can reference for information about this and good historical information. And there's an article from theroot.com. Theroot.com is called 3/5 Clause, Why Its Taint Persists. 3/5 Clause, Why Its Taint Persists. Okay, and we'll post a link here on the thread so you can read this article. All right, it's written by Dr. Paul Finkelman. Okay, PhD, Dr. Paul Finkelman. He does a good job of really breaking this down and dealing with the history behind it. Okay, so when they talk about representatives, they're talking about the U.S. House of Representatives, okay, because they're forming the U.S. House of Representatives. The previous form of government, you're dealing with the Continental Congress and the Articles of Confederation. And under the Articles of Confederation, each state had only one vote, okay? Each state had only one vote. So a state like Virginia, which had a large population of about 690,000 people, had the same amount of votes as a small state Okay, a smaller state like Delaware or whatever the smaller state was at the time. Okay, Pennsylvania, a smaller state like Pennsylvania, or a smaller state like Rhode Island, which only had about 65,000 in population at that time. Okay, so what they're doing is they're changing the way this is done. So they're going to have the U.S. Senate, where each state gets 2 seats in the U.S. Senate. So this is why today you have 50 states in the union and you have 100 U.S. senators. Each state gets 2 U.S. senators, right? But then you have a U.S. House of Representatives, and that U.S. House of Representatives is based upon population. Okay, that U.S. House of Representatives is based upon population. So a state like California, which is the largest state in the union, okay, has more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives than a state like Maine or Vermont, which are 2 of the smallest states in the union. Okay, so the question becomes, and this is what they were debating during the Philadelphia Convention, is how do you count the enslaved population? How do you count the enslaved population? It says representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union, etc. All right. So you have southern states who want to count the full population of those enslaved. And you have northern states who say, well, wait a second, if you count the full population of those enslaved, this is going to give the South total dominance in the U.S. House of Representatives, and you'll be able to just push through whatever legislation you want through the U.S. House of Representatives. So they're going back and forth. Back and forth debating this on how to count the population of enslaved Africans. Okay. And also they're trying to figure out, how do you count them, because they're considered property? How do you count them? How do you tax them as well? All right. So you're going to have a lot of northern states that have a larger overall population. Okay. Like you're going to have some northern states that have a larger overall population and of free people, I should say, a larger population of free people. You're going to have some southern states that have a smaller population of free people, but when you add in the enslaved Africans, they're going to have a larger total population. So for instance, in 1787, if you look at the state of Virginia, Virginia has a total population of 690,000. Okay, 690,000. 288,000 of the 690,000 are enslaved African people. Okay. Whereas if you look at the state of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania at that time had 430,000 people. Okay. About 430,000 people. And but they only had about 4,000 who were enslaved. So they're going back and forth trying to debate this and figure this out. How do you count the population of enslaved African people? Okay. And the North is trying to prevent the South from having total dominance in the House of Representatives. So they're going back and forth. Some people say count half of the population. Some say count 3/4 of the population. They finally decide to count 3/5 of the population in bondage, 3/5 of the population enslaved. Nowhere in the Constitution and nowhere in the 3/5 compromise, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, does it say that the enslaved population was 3/5 of a human being. That's a total misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the U.S. Constitution. Okay. Now, in this article, it says, despite popular understandings, this provision did not declare that African Americans were 3/5 of a person. Rather, the provision declared that the slave states would get extra representation in Congress for their slaves, even though those states treated slaves purely as property. Okay, this was a provision that was not directly about race, but about status and the allocation of political power. The other thing that most people don't know is that African Americans who were free, because there's a small free population, okay, at this time. Now, not counting those indigenous Africans, because of course we know that African people have been in this land we call the United States of America going back at least 51,700 years. And when you look at the work from Dr. David Imhotep, who I talk about a lot in his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, he deals with this evidence there, okay? And there were more African people who were already here than were brought here during the transatlantic slave trade, okay? So, but you're going to have a small population of free African Americans at this time. The full population of free African Americans was counted, okay? The full population of free African Americans was counted. That's something that's not talked about, all right? So free blacks were counted in exactly the same way as whites. The clause did not say that a slave was 3/5 of a person. Once again, it's saying that you count 3/5 of that population, meaning that if, say, for instance, hypothetically, say, for instance, Virginia had 100,000 enslaved African people, okay, you're going to count 3/5 of that 100,000, which is 60,000. And this determines, and you add that number to the number of free persons in the state of Virginia, and this determines how many seats in the U.S. House of Representatives the state of Virginia will get, okay, which is huge because usually legislation will start in the House of Representatives, and once it passes the House, it will go to the U.S. Senate, okay? So this is huge. So this is what this was all about. It does not say we were 3/5 of a human being. The other thing is that if you get a book like this from Dover, this one here, the Declaration of Independence and other great documents of American history, and you study the three-fifths compromise, it'll tell you that the 14th Amendment corrects this. The 14th Amendment corrects the counting of it, okay? So there's a whole lot of just total misunderstanding about the three-fifths compromise. And I've heard PhDs just totally say, you know, the Constitution says we're 3/5 of a human being, things like that. No, it doesn't. And then they don't talk about how that was corrected with the 14th Amendment of 1868. But the other thing is, they don't say, well, wait a second, when the first census was taken in 1790, because the first census is taken in 1790 when the first Congress meets, the full population of African people was counted. Because the reason why the census was created was the national census was to keep track of the population, especially of enslaved African people in ratio to free whites. Because in some states, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, things like this, you had more slaves than you did free people. So, and they could easily be overran. So this is the real reason why the U.S. Census was created. Dr. Claude Anderson talks about this in Black Labor, White Wealth. Black Labor, White Wealth. Dr. Claude Anderson talks about this, okay? All right, so if we continue here, and I'll show you some information from Dr. David Imhotep, because we deal with him in the class also, okay, in our online class. And I'll be teaching a session of that today around 7:30 p.m. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave, teaching in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, okay? If you need me to post the link again so you can register for an online course, it's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. And we deal with thousands of years of history in the online course also. Okay, so I want to delve into this a little deeper here. All right. So the origin of the clause illustrates the Three-Fifths Compromise, illustrates the complete confederation. Each state had a single vote in the National Congress. So in 1787, on the eve of the Constitutional Convention, this meant that Virginia had, which had about 690,000 people, and Pennsylvania, which had about 430,000 people, overall populations, had the same number of votes in Congress as Delaware, with a population under 60,000, and Rhode Island with a population under 65,000. One of the goals of James Madison and the other framers of the Constitution was to replace this undemocratic system of representation with representation in a new Congress based on population. Okay, so What this is going to do is give a lot of power to the South. However, this gives a imbalance in power to the South, and is going to give the South an incentive to keep slavery intact. Also, this is the other thing. It's going to incentive to keep slavery intact. Now, this is going to be combined with the Electoral College. And the Electoral College is created by the U.S. Constitution. It's going to go through a revision when you have the 12th Amendment. It's going to go through a revision, and it goes through a revision after it goes through a revision in 1803 after the election of Thomas Jefferson as president, okay, in 1800. Because Thomas Jefferson wins the presidency, what puts him over are the Electoral College votes from the state of Virginia. And Virginia was the largest state as population wise at the time, but they got those Electoral College votes largely because of their slave population. So because of the 3/5 Compromise of 1787, and because of the Electoral College, which is created by the U.S. Constitution in 1780, this not only gives imbalanced or a greater advantage when it comes to political power for the South, but it also gives them an incentive to keep slavery intact, because 1787 Pennsylvania was on the verge of eliminating slavery. And you're going to have other northern states that are going to phase slavery out. But you're going to have southern states that not only have an economic incentive to keep it in place, but also have a political incentive, because they have a dominance in the U.S. House of Representatives, and they're going to be able to push through whatever legislation they want through the U.S. House of Representatives, because they have more seats in the House of Representatives, because the enslaved African population, 3/5 of that population is counted, even though the slaves can't vote. Okay, so it's important to understand this. Okay, so in 1790, for example, Virginia had a total population of more than 690,000, but 288,000 of that population were enslaved African people. So the state's free population was about 404,000. Now, what's going to happen is, and then when you look at Pennsylvania at this time has a population of 434,000, but only about 4,000 of that population were slaves. Okay. So Pennsylvania was in the process of ending slavery, and by 1790, a majority of the state's black population of Pennsylvania was free, and those blacks could vote on the same basis as free whites. Their full population was counted. So if representation in Congress were based only on the free population, then Pennsylvania would be able to outvote Virginia. Okay, so they're fighting over power here, not just economics, but they're fighting over political power. If slaves were counted in allocating representation, then Virginia would be the most powerful state in the nation with the largest congressional delegation. So Southerners at the Philadelphia Convention, the spring of 1787, at the Philadelphia Convention, okay, and I'm missing some of your comments here. I'll go back. We'll get to some of your comments here on Facebook. I'm trying to go through my notes and get through this information. Okay. And what I'll do here, how's everybody doing? Welcome to the broadcast today. Here I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. We're dealing with the 3/5 Compromise of 1787, sometimes called the 3/5 Clause, says that we were 3/5 of a human being. That's not what it says. So we're going through dispelling this myth. And then also we're talking about the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. I'll be teaching a session of that about 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. We just posted the link there. Register here. You can register for that course because we deal with some of this information in that course, and we deal with thousands of years of history. So it's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. All the sessions are recorded. If you miss anything, you can go back and watch it over and over again. So share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Also invite your friends to tune in as well. Okay, so Southerners at the Philadelphia Convention in the spring of 1787, where they're debating the U.S. Constitution. Okay, the Southerners insisted that slaves be counted when allocating representation in Congress, even though everyone understood that the enslaved population were considered property and had no political rights. So throughout the convention, the slave owners also made it clear that they did not expect an end to slavery in their states, okay? Because they wanted to maintain power. Now, in the state of South Carolina, now remember, South Carolina is the first state to secede from the Union. Okay, which leads to the Civil War. So South Carolina succeeds from the Union December 20th, 1860. And by February 1st of 1861, you're going to have 6 other states that join South Carolina in succeeding from the Union. They're going to form the Confederate States of America, which we know as the Confederacy. And the Civil War is going to start April 12th, 1861 with the attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Okay, this is how the Civil War starts. And the fight was over maintaining slavery. So a lot of the southern states cried states' rights, but it was states' rights that keep slavery intact. Okay, it was states' rights to keep slavery intact. So Charles Pinckney of South Carolina cited ancient Rome and Greece, and he declared that slavery was, quote, justified by the example of all the world, end quote. Okay, his cousin, General Charles Coatsworth Pinckney, told the convention, he's one of the delegates at the convention, one of the Southerners arguing for counting the enslaved population. General Charles Coatsworth Pinckney told the Philadelphia Convention, he said, quote, South Carolina and Georgia cannot do without slaves, end quote. South Carolina and Georgia cannot do without slaves. So the Southerners were adamant that slaves were property, and Southerners will continue to import more enslaved Africans from Africa. And at the same time, those enslaved Africans should be added to the number of free people when representation in Congress was being allocated, because they're jockeying for political power and maintaining political power. This is what this was about. So they wanted to keep economic power by keeping Africans enslaved. And the other thing we have to understand is that there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. There were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. So a lot of times when they tell the story, they try to say that African people, all they did were pick the cotton and cook the master's food, things like this. No. We were the anchor makers. We were the shipbuilders. We were the barrel makers, the bartenders, the beer makers, blacksmiths, coppersmiths. We were boatmen. We were barbers, brewers when it comes to brewing beer, brick makers, bricklayers, brush makers. We were butchers, cabinet makers, carpenters, carpet cleaners, caterers, caulkers, chain makers, chimney sweepers. We were clerks. We were clergymen, cigar makers, clothiers, coach painters, cobblers, confectioners when it comes to making candy and chocolates and things like this. We were coppersmiths, cotton menders, okay, hemp baggers, daguerreotypers. Daguerreotype was the first photographic camera. Invented by John Daguerreotype about 1826, and it's available for commercial usage in the 1830s. Okay, we were decorative furnishers, distillers, domestics. Okay, flower inspectors, fishermen, engravers, engineers, engine builders, embroiders, dressmakers, furniture makers, gardeners, general mechanics. Okay, gold pencil finishers, hair makers, harness makers, hairdressers, gunsmiths, herb doctors, horseshoers, those who put the nailed the shoes onto the horse and make the horseshoes. We were horse trainers, okay, house painters, hunters, ink makers, instrument makers, inventors, iron molders, ironsmiths, jewelers, okay, laborers, lamp lighters, There were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country. So it's not just benefiting from African people picking cotton and cooking the master's food and things like this. It's exploiting the labor. It's exploiting the skills, trades, and crafts that we had in this country from 1619 to 1865. And being able to produce products and market these services, okay, being able to loan out enslaved Africans to work in the coal mines, having them work in the sawmills, different things like this. This is going to lead, and these were very dangerous jobs, by the way. This is going to lead to over 40 insurance companies in this country to take out insurance policies on enslaved Africans on the plantation. Because oftentimes when you had a slave that had a very dangerous job, the slave owner would take out an insurance policy on them. And then if they died untimely, they would recoup 3/4 of the money they had invested in that slave so they could go buy another one. And you had over 40 insurance companies in this country that sell policies on enslaved African people. One of the first ones was the Nautilus Mutual Life Insurance Company, which started in 1845 in Manhattan, New York. In the first 3 years, they sell about 508 policies on enslaved African people. And they're going to change their name to the New York Life Insurance Company. They're going to change their name to the New York Life Insurance Company. Now, to their credit, the New York Life Insurance Company has been open and honest about their ties to slavery. Okay, the majority of that money was not made from those policies, and there's an extensive article from the New York Times that talks about this. But to their credit, the New York Times has been open and honest about this. They provided all different types of documentation on policies of enslaved African people, things like this. Okay, but you have to understand this history. Okay, you have to understand this history. All right. So these are some of the type of things we deal with in the online course that I teach: ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. You've seen me in some documentaries like the Black Friday documentary, Resurrecting Black Wall Street, The Blueprint from Dr. Boyce Watkins and Your Black World Films. I will be in Atlanta this weekend because I got to fly early tomorrow morning to Atlanta for the Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. The Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. Those in the Atlanta area, come on out. It's at the Georgia Piedmont Technical Center. We just posted a link there, liberatedmindsexpo.com. Check it out if you're interested in homeschooling, learning about homeschooling your children. Or if you do homeschool your children, come on out. It's Saturday and Sunday, July 15th, Sunday, July 15th, and Saturday, July 15th, Sunday, July 16th, 2017. And I do my presentation on Sunday. Okay, so you don't want to miss that. Go to liberatedmindsexpo.com. We have the information there. You can also visit our website, africanhistorynetwork.com, africanhistorynetwork.com. Okay, and once again, I'll post a link here if you want to register for the online course that I'm doing today about 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay. And what I'm going to do, I'll pin the link. I'll pin the information here. It says register here. Just click right there. As soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 classes. And we have about 12 hours of bonus footage also. Bonus content, I should say. Bonus content. The class is only $40. Okay. So 3/5 compromise, once again, okay, did not say that we were 3/5 of a human being. That's a total misunderstanding. That's Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Okay, so let's continue here. Now, for information about the skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country, and I talk about this in my course and some of my lectures, you can get the book, The Other Slaves by James E. Newton. The Other Slaves by James E. Newton, Newton, and Ronald Lewis. Ronald Lewis came out in 1978. The Other Slaves, Mechanics, Artisans, and Craftsmen. Okay, The Other Slaves, Mechanics, Artisans, and Craftsmen came out in 1978. Okay, all right. So let's continue here. Okay, so the Southerners were adamant that the slaves were property. They were fighting to get the full population counted. Okay. And Southerners stated that they were going to continue to import more African people from Africa as well. And at the same time, those slaves should be added to the number of free people when representation in Congress was being allocated. Okay. Now, James Wilson of Pennsylvania, one of the delegates there arguing on dealing with this. He's in a state that's phasing out slavery. James Wilson of Pennsylvania, who eventually supported the 3/5 compromise, understood the inconsistencies of the Southern demands. And he said, quote, did not well see on what principle the admission of blacks in the proportion of 3/5 could be explained. Did not well see on what principle the admission of blacks in the proportion of 3/5 could be explained. Okay, quote unquote. He asked if slaves were citizens, quote, why are they not admitted on an equality with white citizens? If slaves were citizens, because you're saying, wait a second, if you want to count them in the population, well, wait a second, you're not giving them the rights of white people. Okay, quote, why are they not admitted on an equality with white citizens? But if the slaves were, quote, admitted as property, end quote, it was reasonable to ask, then why is it not other property admitted in the computation? He's saying, wait a second, your chickens and your cows and your hogs, you're not trying to count them in the population. They can't vote. They don't have rights. Why are you trying to count enslaved Africans in the population? Because you don't want them to vote. Okay. So you have these debates taking place. Okay. You have these debates taking place. Now, the debate over representation was about political power, as I stated. Okay. And we have to understand that politics impacts every aspect of our life. Politics impacts every aspect of our life. Two main ways to understand politics. Number one, politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. The legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. And also politics is the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Politics is the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay. Two main ways to understand politics. All right. Politics is a lot more than just voting. Okay. Many of us don't understand really what politics is. Okay. And I'm going to show you the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, from Dr. David Imhotep, because that has a ton of information in it. And it deals with the African presence in this country here before it deals with the African presence in this country here before slavery started. Okay. All right. So let's continue here. And this is acting up a little bit. I don't know why. Okay, there we go. I'm trying to bring up the trying to bring this up here to show you this in the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So let's continue here. Okay, so you're going to have many Northerners who object to the idea of counting enslaved African people for representation in a nation that was designed to provide liberty for its citizens. Governor Morse, who was a New Yorker who represented Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania, at the Constitutional Convention, noted that if slaves were counted for representation, the inhabitant of Georgia and South Carolina who goes to the coast of Africa and in defiance of the most sacred laws of Georgia and South Carolina, in defiance of the most sacred laws of humanity, tears away his fellow creatures from their dearest connections and damns them to the most cruel bondages, shall have more votes in a government instituted for protection of the rights of mankind than the citizen of Pennsylvania or New Jersey who views with a laudable horror so nefarious of practice. Let me repeat this. He said that the inhabitant of Georgia and South Carolina who goes to the coast of Africa and in defiance of the most sacred laws of humanity tears away his fellow creatures from their dearest connections and damns them to the most cruel bondages shall have more votes in a government instituted for protection of the rights of mankind than the citizen of Pennsylvania or New Jersey who views with a laudable horror so nefarious a practice. So he was one. This is Governor Morse of Pennsylvania. He was a white man who was against the slave trade, and he's saying, wait a second, if you count this slave population, you're going to give these people who participate in this heinous act more power in the House of Representatives than those of us who think it's immoral. Okay. So now, by partially counting the 3/5 of the slave population, but partially counting the population of those enslaved for the allocation of representation, the South gained a huge bonus in the House of Representatives, even though these states considered their slaves to be property as such and had no political voice or legal rights. And this is what I was saying. The enslaved population could not vote, had no legal rights, but it's benefiting the South politically to have more slaves. This gives them an incentive to have more slaves. Okay. And what you're going to find is that when the importation of Africans is outlawed in 1808 because of a 20-year clause in the U.S. Constitution, what you're going to find is that the slave breeding business explodes in this country. The slave breeding business is going to explode in this country. All right. And then you're going to have a couple of things that take place. About 1793, the cotton gin is going to be created. Cotton gin created by Eli Whitney, and then you're going to have copies of the cotton gin that are created. Okay, copies of the cotton gin. What the cotton gin is going to do is it's going to make it easier to pick the seeds out of cotton. It's going to lower the cost of cotton overall to produce it. It's going to lower the cost of cotton products that are made. It's going to increase profitability and create a need for more enslaved African people. Then in 1803, you're going to have the Louisiana Purchase. So Thomas Jefferson is president at this point. He becomes president in the year 1800. You're going to have the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Because of the Haitian Revolution from 1791 to 1803, and the Toussaint Louverture and Boukman Dessalines, etc., because of them defeating the French and Napoleon Bonaparte, is going to cause the French to sell the land they had in this land. And the U.S. is going to get about 828,000 square miles of land for less than 3 cents an acre. 828,000 square miles of land for less than 3 cents an acre. They're going to carve out about 15 states out of this land that they get from the Louisiana Purchase. This is going to give more land to grow crops on, cotton, etc., which means you're going to need more enslaved African people. And because of this, now they're going to try to keep a balance between free states and enslaved states. So all of the new states are not going to have slaves, but some of them are. And is going to give these states dominance in the House of Representatives because you're counting 3/5 of their enslaved population. And they're getting additional seats in the U.S. House of Representatives because of that slave population. Okay. So this fuels a need for more enslaved African people as well. And then in 1808, because of a 20-year clause in the U.S. Constitution that outlawed the importation of enslaved African people, this is going to cause the slave breeding business to explode. They're still going to bring some in. From 1808 to about 1865, I think is about 800,000 to 1 million that are still brought in, but it's going to be to a lesser extent because it's more dangerous. You have abolitionist ships out looking for slave ships, things like this is more dangerous. So the slave breeding business is going to explode in this country. All right. So, so the value to the South of the 3/5 clause became clear in the 7 decades after the U.S. Constitution was written. Southerners were able to block federal legislation hostile to slavery and get the House of Representatives to pass numerous laws that protected slavery because the South has a dominance in the House of Representatives. Okay. So now this is Dr. David Imhotep. He wrote the book, The First Americans with Africans Documented Evidence. Okay. And I've interviewed him a number of times. Some of you all have heard my interviews that I've done with him. I've interviewed him a number of times. Okay. And his book deals with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years. Page 14 of his book, he talks about evidence found in Allendale County, South Carolina, of an African presence. And I'll show you what it says. And you can go to his website, historictruth.info, historictruth.info. Okay. You can go to his website. He has an overview of his book there that you can download. But they found in Allendale County, South Carolina, by Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at University of South Carolina. In 2004, they found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. They found overwhelming evidence documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years, going back at least 51,700 years. Okay. All right. Now, let's continue here. And very quickly here, this is Dr. Albert Goodyear. Okay. You can check out this article. This is from 2004. Okay. This is an article about 13 years ago. This is an article about his discovery in Allendale County, South Carolina. It's called, this is from ScienceDaily.com, which is a scientific journal, scientific website, ScienceDaily.com. It's called New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. And here's a summary of what the article says. Radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Okay. So the Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. Khoisan come from Southern Africa, also known as the Khoikhoi. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world and they're here. You're going to have pyramid mounds built all up and down the Mississippi River. There's a presence of Africans from ancient Kemet here as well. We're making voyages back and forth to Africa also. Okay. And there's a concerted effort to suppress information, archaeological information like this. Okay. You just had a discovery in early June of 2017 that was revealed. All the news outlets had an article about it. We talked about it here at the African History Network. In Morocco, you had skeletal remains of modern man, Homo sapiens, that were found that date back 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. Okay. And this was 100,000 years older, at least, than the oldest fossil remains that they had, which came out of Ethiopia, of modern man, Homo sapiens, that date back 195,000 years ago. Now, this is not talking about Lucy or Dinknesh, that is 3.2 million years old, discovered in 1974 in Ethiopia by Dr. Donald Johansen. That species is Australopithecus afarensis. That's an early form of humans, okay, who we call Dinknesh, which means you are amazing. Europeans call her Lucy. All right. We're talking about modern man found in Morocco of Homo sapiens, modern man, okay, which is the precursor to us, which are Homo sapiens sapiens, but it's still classified as modern man. Okay. You can check out this article from NBCnews.com. We're older than we thought. We're older than we thought. And I'll pull up this article quickly for you so you can see it. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. Now, what's important for people to understand is that these archaeological discoveries are coming out all the time. Okay. These archaeological discoveries are coming out all the time. And when these archaeological discoveries come out, they flip the archaeological world upside down. They flip the archaeological world upside down, and they keep having to push dates back. They keep having to push dates back because the oldest, if we look at the discovery that came out of San Diego, April 26, 2017, mastodon skeletons that date back 130,000 years ago. And the experts are saying that these skeletons, which are precursors to elephants, these skeletons were smashed by humans. And they're saying that this puts a human presence in North America 130,000 years ago. Okay, well, this totally flipped the archaeological world upside down because the modern archaeology says that the oldest civilization in this land of humans, of modern man, is about 13,000 years old, was the Clovis culture in New Mexico. Okay. But there were African people here tens of thousands of years before that, but modern archaeology does not want to acknowledge that. So this is why Dr. Albert Goodyear is being attacked. This is why Dr. David Imhotep is being attacked, because we were here before Native Americans even came into existence. The people who we call Native Americans are the offspring of an intermixing of Africans who were already here and Asians who come here around 3000 BC, and they're going to intermix, and their offspring are who we call Native Americans. Okay, if you look at old pictures of Native Americans, old photographs, old black and white photographs, like this one here, these were dark-skinned people, Native Americans. These weren't the light-skinned, almost white-looking Native Americans you see today. These were dark-skinned people, okay? And the other thing you're going to find is that a lot of indigenous groups of African people who were already here are going to get reclassified as Native Americans by Europeans when they get here. This is a book you can check out. This was only about $6. I got this from Barnes and Nobles a few years ago, back in 2011. Chronology of Native Americans, the ultimate guide to North America's indigenous people, Okay. You may find this at Amazon. You may check your local African-American book dealer, see if they can get it. Okay. This is written by Greg O'Brien. Check for it online. This is only about $6. Okay. Excellent book. All right. Let's continue here. Okay, so how's everybody doing? Hey, for those just tuning in, I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. You've seen our broadcast here. You've listened to our radio show also. All right. We're dealing with the Three-Fifths Compromise, and we're dispelling myths. Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787 in the U.S. Constitution. It did not say that blacks were 3/5 of a human being. That's a total misunderstanding of the Three-Fifths Compromise. Okay. So we're dealing with the history of that, exposing that myth. And we're talking a little bit about some of the things I deal with in our online class. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we'll be doing a session of another session of that class at about 7:30 today. We'll start probably about 7:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can register for that. We'll post a link here. Once again, you can register for the full course. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. And all the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. And as soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 sessions. Then we have about 12 hours of bonus content that you can watch also. So we just posted a link there. You can register for it. The full course is only $40. Okay. And that helps support the African History Network, help us keep doing what we're doing, because this is a lot of work, and this is not cheap, because I set up an online school as well. So that's where I teach at the online school, and you can tune in from around the world. Okay. So how do you all like this type of information today? Is this answering some questions that you have? Okay. Travis said, you repeat what you say. Yeah. The reason why I repeat what I say is because people are tuning in at different times, and they're tuning in for the first time at different times. So I repeat it so they can understand what we're talking about. That's why I repeat what I say. And then also some people who have been listening from the beginning, this is the first time they're hearing this type of information. And sometimes it has to be repeated for them to understand it. Okay. All right. So we posted the link there to register for the class. Now, the 3/5 clause provided the extra pro-slavery representatives in the House of Representatives to secure the passage of the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which brought Missouri into the Union as a slave state. The annexation in 1845 of the state of Texas, which was described at the time as an empire for slavery, because slavery was huge in Texas. Okay. And when you deal with the Alamo in Texas, they were fighting against Mexico. And this is where you deal with Santa Anna. Okay. They were fighting against Mexico because Mexico had outlawed slavery, because Texas was originally a Mexican territory. They had outlawed slavery, and the Alamo Fort, which was, on Mexico's property, they were saying that, well, these black people aren't slaves. Okay. The U.S. is saying, oh, these black people aren't slaves. Okay. So you're going to have this fight at the Alamo, and you're going to have the fight between the U.S. and Mexico as well. Okay. This is dealing with the fight over the Alamo Fort. There's the classic movie about the Alamo stars John Wayne. Okay, and he plays Davy. He plays, I think it was Davy Crockett or John Bowie. John Bowie, who created the Bowie knife. It's named after. He played Davy Crockett. He played Davy Crockett because he had the coonskin hat on. He played Davy Crockett in that movie. Okay, so you're going to have also the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. And this was the law allowing slavery in Utah and New Mexico. You're going to have you're going to have also the law allowing slavery in Utah and New Mexico. All right. And the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. All right. And this opened the Great Plains and Rocky Mountain territories to slavery, because the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. Okay, these are all acts passed by the House of Representatives because they have a dominance because of slavery, right? The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 is going to lead to the Republican Party being founded in 1854 by groups of abolitionists. Okay, by groups of abolitionists. Study the history of the Republican Party. Okay, now it's different than these obstructionist Republicans here trying to do everything they can to put us back into slavery. All right. But the Republican Party was founded to be a counter to the Democratic Party, which was originally a party of the aristocracy and the party of the plantation owners, the slave owners, things like this. And the Kansas-Nebraska Act, what it did was, when the West was, with these Western territories were open to U.S. citizens going into these territories, it gave them the sovereignty to determine themselves if they wanted to have slavery in these new Western territories, as opposed to it being dictated to them by the Union, by the government. It left it up to them. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. All right. Now, none of these laws could have been passed without the representatives created by counting slaves under the 3/5 clause. Okay, the having the dominance in the House of Representatives leads to these laws being passed from the House of Representatives. Okay, now when you look at the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848, okay, this is going to bring Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, California, Utah, and Nevada into the Union. The U.S. gets all this land from Mexico. Okay, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, California, Utah, and New Mexico. Okay, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848. Then in 1849, you're going to have the gold rush in California, 1849. So this is where you get the term 49ers from, as in the San Francisco 49ers, which is in California. This is where that comes from. Okay. All right. So if we look at the Electoral College is tied to the 3/5 Compromise. The Electoral College is created by the U.S. Constitution also. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you this article once again. Let's see, what do we have here? Can I bring it up here? All right. We'll show you this article once again here. All right, I think it'll come up. Okay, yeah, this article here, you can check this out. We're older than we thought New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. This is from NBCnews.com. This is not your news wire, which is a conspiratorial website and borderline fake news. This is not InfoWars. NBCnews.com. All the major news outlets had a story about this. Okay, this is from June 7th, 2017. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. Okay, so check out that article. All right. So when we tie this to the Electoral College was something else that gave the South an incentive to keep slavery intact. And the Electoral College is tied to the 3/5 Compromise. Okay. So the 3/5 clause had a significant impact on presidential elections. All right. At the Constitutional Convention, James Madison said that a direct election of the president, quote unquote, by the people would be the best system, but he rejected it because slaves could not vote, and thus the southern states would be at a disadvantage. Instead, James Madison came up with the Electoral College, which allocated presidential electors based on the number of members of Congress that each state had. This gave the South a bonus in the Electoral College. Okay, so basically with the Electoral College, it's calculated. You add, you take the number of members and a number of seats in the House of Representatives a state has. You add to that the number of U.S. senators a state has. Every state has 2. This tells you how many Electoral College votes a particular state has. Okay, so a state that has more slaves is going to get a larger overall population count, which gives them more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, which gives them more Electoral College votes. Okay, so when you look at, so if we look at what just happened November 8th, 2016, where this fool was elected by the Electoral College, right? He became president-elect. This fool, Donald Trump, okay, the first Russian president of the United States. And I've been saying for months, I don't think he's going to make it to the end of the year. I think he's going to be forced to resign. Okay. If you were shocked when Ali beat Foreman's behind, wait till you see Donald Trump resign, because day after day, more information is coming out about their ties to Russia. And I guarantee you, oh, yes, they colluded with Russia. Oh, absolutely. They colluded with Russia. This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is worse than Watergate. Watergate was a third-rate break-in. The problem, what was really the most severe thing in Watergate was not the break-in, it was the cover-up. It was the cover-up. Okay. And when articles of impeachment were drawn up against Richard Nixon, the first article of impeachment was obstruction of justice. The second article of impeachment was abuse of power. And he was forced to resign from office. This is the first time in history of the United States that a sitting president resigned from office. And this is what Nixon did. Then 48 people around Nixon went to prison. 48 people around Nixon went to prison. This is why you see all these people around Trump who can afford an attorney lawyering up, including Attorney General Jeff Sessions had to get an attorney. This is going to be bigger than Watergate. Remember, you heard that here. And I've been telling people for months, this dude ain't going to make it to the end of the year. Okay. All right. So when we look at the Electoral College and the relationship to slavery, right? Thomas Jefferson becomes president in the year 1800. He wins the presidency in 1800. Okay. At the time, he owned almost 200 enslaved African people. Okay. And he would not have been elected president if it had not been for the Electoral College. He got the Electoral College votes of Virginia. At the time, it was 12 Electoral College votes. At the time, this was the largest state in the Union. It had the most Electoral College votes. And this puts him over the top. This is directly tied to slavery. So even though slavery is long gone, the Electoral College, which allows someone to become president while losing the popular vote, as we just saw with Trump, okay, continues to haunt our political system. It is a perverse legacy of slavery in the 3/5 clause in the Constitution, because they're tied together. They work together. And this gave an incentive to the South to keep slavery intact. Okay, because this is about not just economic power, but political power. All right. Now, the 3/5 clause also provided that if taxes were ever levied on the states according to population, slaves would be counted on a 3/5 basis, meaning 3/5 of the population of enslaved Africans in a particular state. Not saying that not saying that a African slave was 3/5 of a human being. That's not what it says. Okay, and this was for the basis of determining how much taxes the states would pay. Okay, based upon their enslaved population. However, such taxes were never levied against for these slaves, and the Constitutional Convention delegates never expected them to be. Okay, so all right, so that deals with the 3/5 Compromise of 1787, which is tied to the Electoral College of 1787 as well, both created by the U.S. Constitution. Okay, both created by the U.S. Constitution, both benefiting slave-holding states. All right, and when you look at Electoral College, you need 270 Electoral College votes. Okay, to win the presidency, to become president-elect. You need 270 Electoral College votes to become president-elect. Okay, now some people say, "Oh, the popular vote doesn't count. The popular vote doesn't count." No, that's a misunderstanding of the Electoral College. Okay, that's a misunderstanding of the Electoral College. Okay, now how are we doing? How are we doing on Facebook? Can you all still hear me on Facebook? I'm monitoring on my phone, and this is acting up. I may have to reboot my phone. Let me check something here. Okay, how's everybody doing? Okay. Let me refresh this here. Hope we're still broadcasting. Can you all hear me all right on Facebook? Let me reboot this here, and we'll check here on Facebook. Okay, so because I want to make sure you all hear this. All right, and we'll be starting the class shortly here. All right. Okay, y'all can hear good. Okay, that's good. All right, so okay, so when we look at the Electoral College, right, it takes 270 Electoral College votes to win the presidency, okay, to become president-elect. So if we look at Donald Trump, and he thought he was going to lose, he did not think he was going to win. He loses the popular vote by 3 million. About 3 million. He lost the popular vote by about 3 million. He won Michigan. He won the battleground states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by 78,000 votes. He won the battleground states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by only 78,000 votes. So there was rampant vote in addition to interference from Russia, putting Russia writing fake news articles, taking out ads on Facebook, taking out ads on social media with fake news articles, okay, things like this, a real psych ops operation, okay. In addition to things like this, there was rampant voter suppression that took place to attack the African-American vote. So you had 13 new states that had voter ID laws. Okay. Yeah. 13 new states that have voter ID laws, and they had new voter ID laws this time. And we saw that the African-American turnout dropped 7%. And that was largely due to the voter suppression that took place. Okay. So you have some people who say, well, the popular vote doesn't count. Only the Electoral College vote counts. Okay, that's not true. All right, so let me ask a question. On the night of November 8th and going into the next morning, how did Donald Trump become president-elect? He got over 270 Electoral College votes. The cross-check system played a big role also. Cross-check system was huge, which is created by Chris Kobach, Secretary of State in Kansas. Okay, and he's been named vice chair of Trump's election integrity commission, which is really used to gather evidence so they can create more laws for more voter suppression. Okay, this is what this is about, because the cross-check system, and AtlantaBlackStar.com had a good article about the cross-check system. The cross-check system wiped off 1.1 million people off the voter rolls across the country. This is what the cross-check system did. Okay, they knocked off 1.1 million people off the voter rolls across the country, and a lot of people don't even know that this thing exists. All right, and basically, I'll give you this link to AtlantaBlackStar.com to this article. Basically, what the cross-check system said is that Michael Imhotep in Detroit is the same Michael Imhotep in Cleveland, Ohio. So here you have a person that's registered in 2 states, and they are alleging voter fraud. So let's wipe them off the voter rolls. This is what the cross-check system did. Okay, and they knocked 1.1 million people off the voter rolls across the country. Okay, so if your vote didn't count, why are they going to such extreme measures to keep you from voting and make it hard for you to vote? These are things that we have to ask ourselves. So many of our people don't even know that this exists. Okay, so let me show you this article here. All right. This is from AtlantaBlackStar.com. This deals with the cross-check system. Okay. How to get rid of 7 million African-American and Latino voters without anyone noticing. How to get rid of 7 million African-American and Latino voters without anyone noticing. All right. This is about the cross-check system. This is real. Okay. If your vote didn't matter, why are they going through such measures, such extreme measures to suppress the African-American vote and the Hispanic vote as well? Okay. So you have the cross-check system working also. All right. Now the UCC doesn't have anything to do with it. Okay. Uniform Commercial Code. No, it doesn't have anything to do with it. All right. Now, how did Trump become president-elect November 8th? The night of November 8th going into the next morning. He got over 270 electoral college votes. He got a total of 306, I think it was, electoral college votes. You need 270 to become president-elect. Okay. Now, the electoral college does not vote until the first Monday following the second Wednesday in December. So it fell on December 19th. Okay. If I remember correctly, it's the first Monday following the second Wednesday in December. Okay. So how did he become, the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December? That's when Electoral College votes. That fell on December 19th, 2016. Okay. All right. So now all states did not comply with the cross-check system. Okay. All states did not comply. Most of the Republican dominated states, we had a Republican dominated state legislature and governorship. Most of those complied, but it was enough to suppress the vote, because in Michigan, for instance, Trump won Michigan by only 10,704 votes. He won Michigan by 0.2 of a percentage point, but 54,000 people were knocked off the voter rolls in Michigan because of the cross-check system. Most people don't even know this. So all this maneuvering is taking place right in front of our faces, and you got our people talking about your vote doesn't matter. No, your vote does matter. That's why they're trying to suppress your vote. They fear African Americans voting. This was after the 2012 election, presidential election. They had the highest percentage of African Americans voting, 66%. And it scared the hell out of them. Okay. Then in 2013, you had the Supreme Court decision of Shelby County versus Holder, which gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. People talk about the Voting Rights Act doesn't matter. Oh, yes, it did. That's why the Supreme Court struck down Section 5 that weakened the Voting Rights Act that dealt with the pre-clearance of the Voting Rights Act. Research the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And then right after this takes place, you're going to have all these states come out with all these new voter ID and voter suppression laws. And some of the things they were doing was reducing the number of polling places. So this past election, there were 868 less polling places to vote. Why is that? When you research this was not because of the budget cutbacks. This is because they're trying to suppress the vote. That's what this is about. Okay. You had states that reduced the amount of days that you can have early voting. You had states that reduced the amount of Sundays that you can have souls to the polls voting. They're going to reduce the number of those Sundays that you can do souls to the polls, because a lot of African-American churches would encourage their people to go vote on Sunday right after church and have buses taking them to go vote. Well, you're going to have states that reduce the number of Sundays that you can have souls to the polls voting. So if your vote didn't matter, why are they putting these measures in place? They know what they're doing, but we don't understand what they're doing. Okay. So check out this article here. So this is from the nation.com. Nation has some really, really good articles dealing with voter suppression. Okay, Ari Berman wrote a series of articles dealing with voter suppression. All right. And the name of this article is "There are 868 fewer places to vote in 2016 because the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act." This is by Ari Berman, November 4th, 2016. This is 4 days before the election took place. There are 868 fewer places to vote in 2016 because the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. Nearly half of counties that previously approved voting changes with the federal government have cut polling places this election because Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which was the pre-clearance, stated that in the states, which were basically southern states, that had a history of putting in barriers to African Americans voting, these states had to get approval from the federal government before they changed polling places, before they put in new laws like voter ID laws, before they changed the number of weeks that you can do early voting. Before they made any changes, they had to get federal approval for this. When the Supreme Court struck down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act in the Supreme Court case of Shelby County, which is out of Alabama, Shelby County, Alabama, okay, versus Holder. The Holder was Attorney General Eric Holder. They sued Attorney General Eric Holder over the Voting Rights Act from 1965, signed into law by President Johnson. Okay, when that was struck down, that weakened the Voting Rights Act, and then you have all this stuff takes place, all this voter suppression take place, and this is all this maneuvering is taking place right in front of our eyes, and most of us don't even understand what's going on. Now, all these laws are still in place for November 6, 2018, which are midterm elections, and midterm elections are huge. These midterm elections here are critical. These midterm elections here are critical, and people across the country are seeing how important the midterm elections are because it's the U.S. Senate that approves many of the cabinet nominations and the department nominations of the president, Secretary of Education, Secretary of HUD, Secretary of the Environmental Protection Agency, Attorney General. Those are approved by the U.S. Senate. There are only 100 U.S. senators in the country. The U.S. Senate, their senators have a 6-year term. Presidency is only 4 years. House of Representatives is very important also. House of Representatives only has a 2-year term. So you can have more leverage in the House of Representatives also, because every other year they have to run for office. And what they fear the most is losing their job. So you have things being put in place right now to galvanize people to vote and vote a lot of these Republicans out of office November 6, 2018, who are defending and supporting Donald Trump. Okay. So check out this article also. This is a critical article, and read some of the other articles from Ari Berman, Ari Berman, Berman, at thenation.com, thenation.com. Okay. All right. So, okay, we got people on Facebook. All right, good. And we're going to start our online. I have to wrap this up in a few minutes to teach my online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So you can register for that online class. If you need me to post a link again so you can register, let me know, and you'll be able to join us in class tonight. And we deal with thousands of years of history in that class also. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch them over and over again if you miss anything. And as soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 sessions of the course. And we have about 12 hours of bonus content for you to watch also. Okay. So in a nutshell, and to wrap this up, November 8th, 2016 was the presidential election. So Donald Trump got over 270 electoral college votes, because you need 270. Now, there are only 538 electoral college votes. Okay, there are only 538 electoral college votes. There are, you take the number of members in the U.S. House of Representatives, which is 435 currently. You add to that the number of seats in the U.S. Senate, which is 100. And then you add 3 electoral college votes for Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. So you get 538. Okay. So he gets about 306 total. How did he become president-elect? How did he get those electoral college votes associated with the states when the electoral college didn't vote till December 19th? It's based upon population. It's based upon the popular vote. I'm sorry, let's rephrase that. It's based upon the popular vote in a state. To win a state, like the state of Michigan, for instance, has 16 electoral college votes. To win a state and to get the electoral college votes associated with a state, so you can get to at least 270, you have to win the popular vote in the state. So he won the state of Michigan by 0.2 of a percentage point. So he got the 16 electoral college votes associated with the state of Michigan. He won other states. He won most of the southern states. He got the electoral college votes in those states. But the reason why he won those states is because he won the popular vote in the state. So how can people say the popular vote doesn't count? They don't know what they're talking about. The popular vote does count. This is why there was so much effort to suppress the popular vote. The overall popular vote, the total popular vote, is not what matters. It's the popular vote in a state that matters, because you can't win the electoral college votes associated with a state unless you win the popular vote in that state. So when people say the popular vote doesn't matter, they don't know how it matters. All this stuff is taking place in front of us. We don't even understand how this works. All this is taking place in front of us, and we don't understand how it works. Scalia. Okay, Antonin Scalia. Okay, now in some ways, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch is worse than Scalia. Now, the people who told you don't vote, they didn't say, wait a second, the next president is probably going to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices in their first term, which will determine federal law or Supreme Court law, Supreme Court rulings. It'll determine that for the next 30 years, at least about the next 30 years. The people that told you don't vote didn't tell you that. People that told you don't vote didn't say, wait a second, the next president is going to nominate an attorney general. An attorney general is over the investigations of the patterns and practices of police departments. The attorney general, you look at Attorney General Eric Holder. Did you know that the U.S. prison population is the lowest it's been in almost 20 years because of policies of President Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder to back off of charging low-level nonviolent drug offenders with the longest, harshest sentences, and to favor more rehabilitation for drug offenders, things like this, those addicted to drugs. U.S. prison population dropped down to 1.53 million in December 2015. It's not 2.3 million, no. And that's coming straight from the Department of Justice. Okay? So we don't even understand how this stuff works. So, and now the people who told you don't vote, they don't know what the hell to tell you to do now. Because Trump and his secretaries of these different departments, Attorney General, Secretary of Education, they are steadily reversing policies that President Obama put in place that are actually beneficial to African Americans. But we didn't even know they existed. So we didn't know what to fight for and try to maintain, because we didn't even know that this stuff existed. Okay. Well, no, that's not true, Vernon. You should actually read policy. You read their policies. Now, this is why I told people, and you go back and listen to my radio shows, I told people consistently, I said, go to DonaldJTrump.com, read his 13 policies he had there. And I told people, go to HillaryClinton.com, read her 36 policies. And then you look, because you have, see, we get caught up on personality. We don't study policies. I saw over 100 campaign speeches that Donald Trump gave. I saw over 100 campaign speeches that Donald Trump gave. Up until April, I was doing national radio 5 days a week. So I researched this stuff thoroughly. I have hundreds upon hundreds of articles on Donald Trump and the election. I watch between 6 and 10 hours of MSNBC a day. Most days is 12 to 14 hours, just like I have it on right now. Okay, it's just muted. So I do extensive research. Now, not only that, I fact check their statements. So there are 8 different fact checking news outlets that I use to fact check statements from the candidates. And I fact check all 3 of the presidential debates as well. All three of the presidential candidate debates between Trump and Hillary Clinton also. So I have all that information. I use Washington Post, New York Times, NBC News, politifact.org, Think Progress. It's a number of different, it's about 8 different fact-checking sources that I use. Okay. So if you actually have an agenda and you have things that are interest to you, like criminal justice reform. Well, Donald Trump didn't have a criminal justice reform program. He did not have a criminal justice reform plan. His criminal justice reform plan was Law and Order, which is a throwback to Richard Nixon. If you actually go to HillaryClinton.com, and I'm not a fan of her, but I don't get caught up on personality. I focus on policy, because policy tells you the trajectory of that presidency. And what most people don't know is that the president has 4,000 positions they have to fill in their administration. Trump has 4,000 positions he has to fill in his administration. Most people don't know this. Okay. Trump has 4,000 positions he has to fill in his administration. If you actually look at what's happened to this with Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos is reversing policies that President Obama put in place that are actually beneficial to us. Okay. No, she wasn't all about law and order. She actually has a criminal justice reform program. She had a pretty good one, because actually, when you actually study her policies were continuing policies of President Obama, because Obama was the war on drugs was actually winding down under President Obama. It was President Obama who said in August of 2016 that they were not going to renew the contracts with privatized prisons for the 13 federal prisons that were using privatized prisons. They were not going to renew these contracts with them. The Obama administration, if you actually see, I don't deal with opinions. I deal with facts and evidence. I don't deal with opinions. I deal with facts and evidence. Okay. So when you research this, you see that when that decision came out in August of 2016, the stock price of Core Civic which is the largest owner-operator privatized prisons in the country, which is a publicly traded stock. I think it's CXW is their stock exchange symbol. They used to be called Corrections Corporation of America. When that decision was revealed in August of 2016, the stock price of Core Civic dropped 40% in one day. Core Civic and Geo Group, which are the two largest owner-operators of privatized prisons in the country, Core Civic and Geo Group, what they did was donated almost $600,000 to Donald Trump's campaign. See, people don't know this. I do research. I do not deal with opinions. I deal with facts and evidence. Proper documentation ends all conversation. This is why we're getting screwed by policies and people are caught up on personalities. Now, wait till they cut your EBT cards and see what happens. Okay. When you look at Trump did not increase funding for HBCUs after he met with the presidents of HBCUs. Okay. See, when you study these draconian policies, you see they're coming from Republicans. Who's trying to take away health care from 22 million people? Those are Republicans. Who is trying to pass laws in at least 18 states to crack down on protesters? Because the protests have been very effective. These are Republicans. Who was it that derailed the bipartisan criminal justice reform that was taking place in the U.S. Senate in 2016? That was Jeff Sessions. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, who is a law and order guy, who is now your attorney general, who is against investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments. He's against this, okay? And he tried to back out of the one with, I think it was Baltimore, but the federal judge ruled that they couldn't back out of it. When it came to the Department of Justice being involved in a lawsuit dealing with the Texas voter ID law, the Obama administration was on the side of civil rights organizations. But when Jeff Sessions became attorney general, they flipped and they backed out of that lawsuit because the Trump administration is for these voter ID laws and voter suppression. Okay, so we don't even understand this. This is why I tell people to do the fact check the statements, read policies. Policies tell you the trajectory of an administration. We don't want to read policies. We want to deal with conspiracy theories. Okay, do that. Did you read Trump's budget? In Trump's proposed budget, he cut Pell Grants by $3.9 billion. Do you understand that 62% of African Americans who go to college go on Pell Grants? See, we don't even know this stuff. And Pell Grants, you don't have to pay back. 62% of African Americans that go to college go on Pell Grants. 73% of African Americans that go to HBCUs go on Pell Grants. Trump talked about what the hell do you have to lose? That's what he asked African Americans. Okay, Trump is cutting funding to various organizations that help African Americans start businesses. All this stuff is taking place in front of us. Okay, and we're dealing with conspiracy theories. All right, we're about to be wiped out because of our own ignorance. Okay. And the other thing that a lot of people don't know is that the Obama administration had more investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments than any other presidency since about 91, because it was after the Rodney King beating that the U.S. Congress gave the Department of Justice the authority to investigate the patterns and practices of police departments. And then there's 25 investigations that led to about 14 to 15 consent decrees, which is federal oversight. These are agreements between the Department of Justice and the police department to implement reforms. And there's federal oversight to this. If within a certain period of time that police department does not adhere to the agreement, then they can be sued by the Department of Justice. And as opposed to recommendations, these can become mandates. Okay. So there's a whole lot at stake here. And Well, Obama was not on the ballot, but President Obama's policies were on the ballot. But since we get caught up on personalities and don't understand policies, then we say, oh, I'm not voting. No, his policies were on the ballot because Trump ran on the platform. One of his platforms was repeal and replace Obamacare. Well, Obama, but what people don't understand is, number one, whether you have Obamacare or not, the Affordable Care Act, that law prevented insurance companies from being able to insure you if you had pre-existing conditions. Number one, regardless of whether you have it or not, that changed law for everybody. Number two, it prevented them from charging you more money for premiums just because you have a pre-existing condition. That applied to everybody across the board, whether you have the Affordable Care Act or not. Number three, what it did was this allowed children to stay on their parents' health insurance until the age of 26, as opposed to having to get off their parents' insurance at the age of 25. This applied across the board, whether you have the Affordable Health Care Act or not. The other thing was about 30% of Americans did not know that the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare were the same thing. So you have many poor whites in southern states who have Obamacare, but it's called the Affordable Care Act, and they don't know that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act are the same thing. This is why you have all these poor whites across the country rising up saying, don't take away my health care, because they found out that Obamacare and the Affordable Health Care Act are the same thing. In the state of Kentucky, it's not called the Affordable Health Care Act. It's called Kentucky Connect. You got all these poor whites who are Republicans who vote Republican. They have Kentucky Connect, and they don't know that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act are the same thing. They just found out recently. This is why they have so many of them that this is why you have so many of them that are who are going to these protests saying, don't take away my health care. They found out they had Obamacare because when Trump was running, Trump said, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. He said this over and over again. He didn't call it, most of the time, he did not call it the Affordable Health Care Act. He called it Obamacare, which fooled a lot of these ignorant ass white people and said, yeah, get rid of Obamacare, because a lot of them don't, because out of white supremacy and racism, a lot of them don't like President Obama because he's African-American. That's the only reason why. Okay. So they said, let's get rid of Obamacare. Okay. But if they said, let's get rid of the Affordable Health Care Act, they say, wait, no. I have the Affordable Health Care Act. Get rid of Obamacare. All right. They sit up and watch Fox News all day and don't know that they're the same thing. Okay. So, they kill me calling them entitlement programs when you pay out of your paycheck. Yeah. Well, these are tricks from the right wing. These are tricks from the right wing. Okay. You gotta watch this. So we just posted that article from abcnews.com. States won by Trump have highest Obamacare enrollment. All these poor white people voted for Trump and they have the highest Obamacare enrollment, highest enrollment in the Affordable Health Care Act. Okay. So check out that article. Okay, so for those just tuning in, hey, I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show, talk show host, researcher, and lecture and writer. Did you all learn anything? How'd you all like this? Did you all learn anything? How do you all like this type of information? Okay, and we're also doing an overview of an online class that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. When we deal with the Electoral College, check out the article from factcheck.org. That's another fact-checking website I use, factcheck.org. The reason for the Electoral College, Check out the article from AtlantaBlackStar.com. The Electoral College has its origins in slavery. The Electoral College has its origins in slavery from AtlantaBlackStar.com. The Electoral College has its origins in slavery. Big article from New York Times. How does the Electoral College work? How does the Electoral College work from November 8th, 2016? How does the Electoral College work? Okay, those are some good articles for reference on the Electoral College. All right. Okay. So how you all like this type of information? Okay. Charlene and Clarence. Okay. All right. So if you like this type of information, you can register for the online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. You just posted a link there again, it says register here. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. All the sessions are recorded. We do it live. We usually do it on Friday. So we're going to get out of here in a few minutes. So I start this class. We're running a little over. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch it over and over again. As soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 sessions, and you can. We have about 12 hours of bonus content for you to watch also. So the course is only $40. You can watch it over and over again also. It's a ton of information. And we deal with the transatlantic slave trade chronologically, not episodically. A lot of people deal with it episodically as an episode in history. You can't deal with the transatlantic slave trade as an episode in history. You have to deal with it chronologically. So we deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. We deal with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. We deal with how the Moors also lead to Columbus. All right, so we should be back here. It's a problem with the streaming. I had to reload the page. Okay, so we posted a link there. You can register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So I'm about to teach a session right now. We're running a little late here. We posted the link. If you need me to post it again, let me know. It says register here. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. So we deal with the transatlantic slave trade chronologically as much as possible. You can't deal with the transatlantic slave trade as an episode in history. It didn't just fall out of the sky. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. We deal with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. We deal with the impact of Christopher Columbus as well, because Columbus and his 4 voyages. We also deal with religion. You have to deal with religion and the impact of Christianity on slavery, but also religion as it ties back to Christianity, as it ties back to ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, Asar, Aset, and Heru, who were known as the First Holy Trinity. And Heru being born on December 25th of a virgin birth, to Aset, the virgin, who the Greeks called Isis. So we deal with that, and we deal with things like the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Why is Christmas celebrated on December 25th? We deal with the origins of the word America, as well as the origin of the word Africa, because Africa was not named after Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus. A Roman general is not named after him. Africanus actually means belonging to Africa, Okay, so we deal with information like this in archaeological discoveries, recent archaeological discoveries also that are causing archaeologists to have to push dates back. When these new discoveries take place, like some of the ones we talked about, like coming out of Morocco or coming out of San Diego, the Mastodon skeleton, they keep having to push dates back. Okay. So we deal with that type of information as well. All right. So let's see. Okay. Let me see if you have any questions here. All right. So how's everybody doing this evening? And this video will be here on Facebook. You can watch it over and over again. We'll put it on our YouTube channel as well. All right. Okay, so we'll post a link again here so you can register for the class. Full course is only $40. I have to get out of here. Hey, remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. what you have been what you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. We'll talk to you next time. And you can post your comments here on the thread on Facebook, even after we end, and I'll catch some of them. And we'll see you in class. All right. All right. Peace. Hotep.